Steve here, and welcome back to the Friendoville channel. It's the Four Lights Podcast, special edition, Picard, Season 1, Episode 1, and I'm joined today by the man himself, Tim Spulak. How you doing, Tim?
I'm amazed to be here. Never thought
really?
it would happen. Yeah.
This is like Make-A-Wish for you, isn't it?
Pretty much. Well, that's how I sit next to you, offering you something, but
if you're like dying or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. So here's the deal. Jeff, as you guys know, it's been difficult enough to get on the same page with Jeff for the next the core Four Lights programming, which is like we're going to review all of Next Gen, and then hopefully one day we'll get to Deep Space Nine and Voyager. And so he had suggested to me not long ago. He says, "Hey, you know, since we seem to be having difficulty getting on the same page, and when we do it remotely, it hasn't been like just the chemistry isn't there because there's a delay. Do you want to like just start breaking up the episodes like you do it with somebody that you know, and then I can do it with one of my buddies in LA?" And I was like, "No, I don't want to do that." And then I got like some different software that's going to make things better. I was like, "No, we're definitely doing Four Lights together." But I was thinking about it, and I was like, "Hold on a second, though. He has a guy in LA that he knows. He's been catching up on Discovery." And I was thinking to myself, "Okay, well, hold on a second. Jeff can do Discovery with his friends in LA." And then I was like, I can do Picard. And I thought of one man, and it's you, Tim. And I'm very glad that you said yes, because your enthusiasm. Honestly, I kind of feel like you've been one of the few people who has been the third man on Going in Raw. And I honestly think you were, and this is not taken away from anybody else who's been on the show, you've been my personal favorite third man. You did it. Not only were you a third man, you were in front of 60 people at Friendo Fest being the third man, and you handled yourself amazingly.
These numbers keep on growing. I thought it was like 30, then you said 40, now it's 60.
I know.
A whole stadium. From
the moment I looked at the video afterwards of Friendo Fest, I knew it was clearly, it was like 60. It was at least, and I was shocked. I was like, oh my God. Because I thought it was like 30. And then I went back and looked, and I was like literally counting the little pixelated heads. I was like, we had like 60 people there.
Wow.
I was impressed. Yeah.
It was a blast. And I'll hopefully try to be with you as much as I can for these reviews. I
hope you're with me all the way. I mean, this is going to be a little bit easier than like tackling all of Next Generation. On one hand. On the other hand, like we are going to try to do these as soon after Picard airs. And then we'll see where we go from there, because I know, you know, it's a 10 episode season from what I understand. They've already greenlit a season 2, so we'll see where this goes. I also like having you on board simply because this channel is called Friendoville, and it's not just called Steveville where it's just him sitting here, and I do that enough. I do that a lot here on the channel. It's just me doing stuff, but it's nice to bring friends in. Friendoville. There you go. Another quick note: we do have merch available now. On the Teespring, there should be a merch shelf below this video where you can order the Four Lights Podcast t-shirt. I'm going to have there's also a Friendoville shirt there. I'm also going to be doing some other stuff as well. So be sure to check that out. But let's just hop right into this, man. In a nutshell, Tim, how'd you like that first episode of Picard?
Without any spoilers, we're
doing spoilers.
Well, eventually, but starting off, for those, We'll say spoiler alert when we get into it. But
right.
Wow. Mixed feelings. Like, it's very, very emotional. You see, we'll get into obviously the acting, everything else. I really don't have anything bad to say. There are some maybe tropes from more modern storytelling, you might say. Other than that, there's not bad acting, pacing. They had to rush some things, but I'm nitpicking at best. Yeah, I'm exceeded more than I expected. Now my expectations are really high.
Yeah, me too. From the first trailers we saw, my expectations were really high, and this beat all expectations I had. I really love the story themes they're obviously getting into from the jump. I thought that the world building here, with the budget they have, and you mentioned this to me before, you read somewhere they said, you know, with the budget they had in Next Generation, they could build chunks of this ship. And in this, they have the budget to build like the entire thing, you know?
Yep.
I thought that there was so much that was so lovingly a throwback to the original series. It almost reminds me a little bit of something Patrick Stewart said, I believe, about Generations, the first Next Generation movie, in that he said, you get to see the Enterprise lit in a very dramatic way, and you just saw it on TV not 6 months prior, whenever it was the finale aired for Next Generation, and then when Generations came out, I think it was like a 5 or 6 month difference, and you could see everything. You could see it just lit lovingly, like with a proper budget and proper time. And that's how this is. The episode begins with the most lovingly photographed, and it's all CG, but the most lovingly photographed Enterprise D.
I guess we should probably say, hey, we'll be spoilers from here on out, because cutting into that first scene, you feel the influences from, I mean, the lens flare from J.J. Abrams, shooting over, the Enterprise. The funny thing is, the song from Nemesis, them playing cards was the last scene from Next Gen.
All things, yeah.
There was everything Star Wars or everything Star Trek was just. It was concentrate. That first opening segment, they had 40 minutes of them playing cards, of Data and Picard playing cards starting off. I would have been happy with just that.
Yeah, I know that it's funny because so we'll get to that second. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I'm really excited. I really love everybody that they've introduced so far. I think they've done a really good job casting. And a lot of them are like, we can get into the geekier aspect of things, like when we first see Starfleet uniforms as they are now, which is an interesting throwback to what they were prior, like during the, they're basically Deep Space Nine outfits.
Yeah.
They sort of went to, because you see the movie outfit in one of the dream sequence, the very first dream sequence. There's a lot of really interesting, very nerdy Easter eggs that I really appreciated, especially because I do remember one of the castmates, I think it was Patrick Stewart, also talking about Nemesis, and he said, there should have been an act. You know how usually there's a director's cut of a movie. He said there should have been an actor's cut because there was so much stuff in there that we as the actors felt were basically love letters to the fans. There's a lot of geeky stuff in Nemesis that didn't make it in the movie because the director of the movie didn't really want to. He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to make it closely associated with the TV series, which blows my mind. They honestly should have got Jonathan Frakes to direct Nemesis, and it blows my mind that they didn't, because there was all sorts of little gags in there that didn't make it into the movie. And I think that's one reason that people had a problem with the movies, because of that, because they didn't, it wasn't enough of a Next Generation love letter, even though it had its fair share of stuff in there. This really did feel like this. They understood, nostalgia is totally okay. You don't want to base everything off of nostalgia, but if you use that as a starting point and you sort of continue this world that people know, and the way you do that is through those Easter eggs, is through those details. And Picard did that excellently. I thought it was absolutely amazing.
Agreed. I mean, with Patrick Stewart also executive producing it, and all these other people that are because we know Frakes directed the first. You have these people that are just wrapped up in Trek, making the Trek series that they kind of wouldn't have agreed to if they didn't want to, if they didn't like it. So
yeah, absolutely. It should be noted, Jonathan Frakes is actually directing a couple episodes in the series. He didn't direct the first episode.
He's 3 and 4, right? I thought it was 1 and 2, but maybe it's 3 and 4.
It's probably 3 and 4 if it's anything. And I know I had let's see.
Watch it be the episodes he's in.
That would not surprise me at all. Let's see here. Oh man, this is bugging the crap out of me now. Hold on a second. Star Trek Picard. Here, while I look this up, start describing scene 1 of Picard.
Okay, so scene 1, obviously you pan over the Enterprise, I believe it's D, and you zoom in from the outside going in, and you just see Picard sitting at a table playing poker. And the interesting thing about it, like, it's lens flare. It's very J.J. Abrams feeling, very cinematic, like Steve was talking about, where Next Gen kind of had more of a soap opera feel, but this has the cinematography to fit, with the CG. And then you see cards getting tossed out, and it cuts to Data.
Sorry, Hanelle Culpepper. the Hanelle M. Culpepper, and she had directed. Oh, come on! I think she had directed. Let's see here. Picard. Oh yeah, she did. She did some episodes of Discovery. That's what it was.
Okay.
That makes obvious
Oh, and
sense.
it looks great too.
And it looks like, oh, she also directed some. There's a terrific show on Stars called Counterpart,
okay,
which it like deals with alternate universe stuff, but it's got what's his face in it? The guy who plays what's his name? J.K. Simmons.
I like
it's a terrific show. I think they left it on a cliffhanger, and I don't think they're continuing the season. So,
that stinks.
Yeah, but anyways, so yeah, like you said, and the interesting thing about it, it does have. I mean, look, the one thing that I view as a positive, I'll be honest with you, that the Abrams universe sort of gave us was a visual template for a lot of the directing, visual directing on these episodes. Like if you see how the camera moves. Yep. As if it's no gravity. That's what's great about this. And that goes to the Star Trek reboot in 2009, and that has continued through Discovery. And yeah, is he a bit much on the lens flares? J.J. Abrams has been known to do that. However,
or the shaky cam, but
yeah, stuff like that.
There was no shaky cam in this.
Right. But the very free-flowing, no, like low-gravity cameras, which is all over Discovery. And I really like that. I think it's great because you got to figure by that time, the cameras of the day are going to be like that. You know, we even saw them in this when they were hovering around Picard for the TV interview. And I do appreciate, I mean, it looks like $1 million, and the cameras, the way they always glide with just grace and precision. I really, really love that aspect of it. And it's something you could never have done back in the day with Next Generation. And so, yeah, like you said, Picard and Data, they're playing cards. And that was a very good point you made. It's a throwback to the last time we saw them on the show on TV was them playing cards. The first time Picard had played cards, poker, which was really magnificent.
And Data's outfit was was the last outfit he saw him in.
That's right. Yeah. It was the movie era outfit, and then later on in the next dream we see him in the TV uniform.
Yep.
So Picard, this is a great little bit too, how Picard discovers that Data had been manufacturing a poker tell by his eye would
one of his pupils start dilating a little bit.
It would dilate. That's right. I was trying to think of the word dilate. Yeah. His pupils would start dilating, and he says that you're trying to manufacture a tell. So when you don't do that, I know when you're bluffing. And Data, it's a very humorous, very cute.
I don't know what to do now.
Yeah, I have to change my deception now, which was great. And then so he sort of puts the bet back on Picard. He says, he's putting 50 in, and Picard says, well, that's all I have. And Data says, I feel like you're stalling. And Picard says, it's because I don't want the game to end.
Yeah, because he starts making his Earl Grey, and it's very bittersweet when Picard says, I don't want this to end. And you're like, oh.
I know. Immediately, I'm like, I've got tears. And then, so then Data puts down his cards, and he's got 5 queens. Have you thought at all about what the 5 queens would represent?
I didn't catch that the first time. Going back, I think it was just the way to break the illusion that it was a dream. Because when we cut into this, he doesn't say Data, I don't believe, at the beginning. So you didn't know if it was before or whether it was Data. We didn't know where it was at.
That's a good point.
And so, like, I was questioning, and then the 5 queens that he lays down breaks the illusion. And then right after that, he kind of looks up and he goes, wait, what are we doing at Mars? And then, the red planet's right there in the background. And then all of a sudden he looks back at Mars and cuts back, Data's gone. Yeah. And then all of a sudden Mars just explodes and it comes through the ship. It's a dream.
Yeah, it's a dream. So he wakes up. And of course, obviously the Mars exploding thing would play pretty heavily into the story a little bit later. But Picard wakes up. We're on the Picard vineyard in Le Bar, France. And we learned this in the trailers, but it's great. Patrick Stewart demanded once he found out Picard has a dog, he demanded it's a pit bull because he's a big fan of pits. And the dog's name, of course, is number one.
Number one at Chateau Picard in France.
Yes, and it was just absolutely, it's just the most adorable dog ever.
It is. It's my wife thought that it was his dog, but she remembers something very, very specific. But yeah, he's like, I want to be an advocate, and I believe it's a rescue dog, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
That's
wow,
there in
wow.
the show too. And yeah, it's hopefully he becomes kind of a mainstay. Hopefully they bring him on the ship. But I also want to see, like, you know, animals being treated fairly, because you hear those weird stories and stuff.
Yeah.
And if anybody's going to be protective of a dog, I think it's going to be Patrick Stewart in the series.
Yeah, I would think that the dog would probably stick around the Chateau Picard just because they've got those very nice Romulans there to protect them. So anyways, yeah, so he opens up his door and there we are, we're on the vineyard. After that, we are with Dahj and her boyfriend, who we never know his name, I don't think.
No.
And I don't know, I don't even know what the species is.
No, they're there in Boston. It cuts to Boston, Massachusetts, and it has the tall skyscrapers like they do in San Francisco thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he has two eyelids, kind of like Men in Black, really, where he blinks one way and then blinks the other way.
Yeah.
And his hair, and it's played by an African-American actor, and his hair, though, looks like petals of some kind.
Yeah.
And then he has some like light markings on his face, and really, really interesting character design. And she mentions how she likes, you know, she likes it when he blinks twice and they're kind of drinking wine and getting all, you know, sweet on each other. And
yeah. And then it was kind of interesting also, like there was some like living flowers as well. There was like some flowers kind of nearby.
I think it's the flowers that her father invented, the crossbreed. That's what I really read into it, but I don't know.
Okay, well, that'd be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah, like you said, they're getting their drink on, and she mentions that she's been accepted to the Daystrom Institute, which of course we've heard of before. And she has a specialty in artificial intelligence, quantum intelligence. And he's excited about that. It's a big deal. And he goes over to the replicator to get her something. And as he does so, some men clad in black with Romulan disruptors. They made a very, very distinct point of showing for the nerds, hey, if you're catching what kind of gun this is, then you're in the know. They're Romulan disruptors. They're shaped because they've got the thing, and then they've got the thing also.
These motorcycle gang stormtroopers.
That's a good way of putting it, because they're all clad in like black leather, but then with some like really cool looking helmets. At one point, one guy talks in, and this is I don't get that nerdy, but apparently one of the guys talks in Romulan, whatever the Romulan language is, and the guy says, "Hey, speak in English."
Speak English.
But it was interesting. The teleporters were they're faster than any teleporters we've seen before. They just blink in and out, and boom, they're there.
I mean, there's a little bit of a visual cue, but yeah, less than half a second, and they're in and out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
they just appear in their living room, and
yeah, I mean, one guy like during a fight scene later on, they're able to beam him like he falls off a ledge, and they beam him.
And halfway through the fall, he's gone.
Yeah. So, anyways, they come in, they immediately throw a knife and kill the boyfriend, and they start interrogating her violently. They start like beating her up a little bit. And they were asking her like things about it. Where are you from? And then they put this weird device on her temples.
Yep. It brings up like a HUD across her eyes almost.
Yeah, it reminded me, like, to get really nerdy, it reminded me of the stupid game that Wesley brought to the Enterprise on that episode when everybody's like getting off on this game, and then they started.
Was it Wesley or was it Riker?
No, it was Wes. He brought it back because maybe was it Riker? I thought it was Wes.
Riker, because he was on the luxury planet, and she's like, put the ball in the hole.
Okay, all right. Okay, man. Okay, you're right about that. Okay. Wes was the guy who saved the day, though. He was the guy who was like, "Oh no, don't wear these things," and then Ashley Judd ended up like turning on him. So anyways, it kind of looked like that. She had like you said, like a laser light HUD thing in front of her face. Anyways, they put a bag over her head and they say, "Hey, knock her out so we can do this interrogation somewhere else."
Yeah, because they ask, "Do you know where you're from? Where are you from? Where are you from?" And she's like, "What are you talking about? I don't know." And then they're like, "Oh, she's not active."
I think she yells like, "Oh, I'm from Seattle" or something like that. And then yeah, they said she hasn't been activated. And then we find out what activate it is, because one guy he like goes to throw a punch to knock her out. And then she like, very swiftly goes into like, Kung Fu mode.
Matrix, Neo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just eviscerates all of her guys, all of the attackers. She shoots one. It's very John Wickish.
But with a black bag over her head.
Yes.
So they went to go kidnap her, and she couldn't see, or at least we couldn't tell she could see. So she's doing all this with basically her vision gone, and she just blasts a couple of guys and does her kung fu, and then all of a sudden she goes checking her boyfriend, and these Romulans are dead, and she has blood all over the place, and that's kind of where we leave her, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's pretty violent. She kills them all. She goes to her boyfriend, and she's freaking out over him. Obviously, it's a very traumatic thing. And then she has this vision of Picard, and she's like, "Oh, I need to go find this guy." We get the opening title sequence, which is just very lovely. It's like a string quartet or something, and we get like some shots of the vineyard thing, like pieces that are cracking apart. That like sort of and
glass cracking, and it falls through the vineyard and goes through the Borg cube and then lands on Picard's face or something.
Yeah, that's a good way. That sounds like somebody explaining to a VFX guy, this is what I want, like a vineyard and some stuff falling, and then it turns into Picard, but it goes through a Borg cube, because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So anyways, the open of the episode, we're back on the vineyard, Chateau Picard. And Picard's out there just tending the grapes or whatever with his pit bull, who then brings a dead animal back to Picard, who, for the first time, we've heard him speak a little bit of French before, but like he hammers it home. He is speaking fluently to this dog in French, saying, "You're not bringing that thing inside." It was very cute.
And he goes, "I know you can understand me. I know you know French."
We've been practicing our French, exactly.
Yeah.
We also find out he's got 2 Romulan helpers. I think one's name was Eris and the other one was Giovanni.
Didn't catch it, but they were very, very close. They hold him in high regard, and they're close enough to kind of give him. They want what's best for him, and they try to guide him towards what's best for him. And you can feel the friendship and the respect that they have without really wanting to cross the line.
Mm-hmm.
And she wants him to go in and get a good breakfast because he has a big day, and we don't know quite what the big day is.
Yeah.
But in the background, the male Romulan is watching something about the anniversary of something, and we don't quite know what. But there's explosions, and it's really interesting. A lot of world building and character building, but a lot of stuff going on in the background of this show too.
And it's great because it's done with just enough intrigue that you don't know what's going on, and you find it along the way during the interview, which is a very tense moment, because not only are you with Picard trying to battle this, obviously, the unscrupulous journalist who's broken her word, but also like, there's that tension, but there's also tension of like, what are they talking about here? So the characters' names are Laris and Joban. Those are the Romulans. And the funny thing is, because Joban, the last time I had seen this actor, actually I'd seen him, I think, on Sons of Anarchy, I think, but he was also very distinctly in an early episode of Deadwood, where he plays a complete scumbag who like murdered kids, and he was the guy who Wild Bill Hickok and Seth Bullock sort of team up, and it's the first time they are on the same page by shooting this guy down. And he was like the biggest scumbag in the show, and he was only in there for like an episode, but he left such a mark on me. When I saw this Romulan, I was like,
wow, you're like, oh no, this is the bad guy.
I was like, this piece of crap. But they both play very loving, very gentle, basically sort of caretakers of Picard. And their relationship with him is very interesting. I just want them to live. I want them and the dog to live. That's all I care about.
Yep.
So anyways, they're talking about he's got an interview coming up to commemorate what we eventually find out is the Romulan supernova. This actually happened in the 2009 reboot movie. So
yes, it did.
Alex, I think it's Alex Kurtzman. Let's see here. Yeah, Alex Kurtzman co-created this series, is a writer on the series, and he actually wrote the first 2 reboot movies as well, or co-wrote them anyways.
Yep.
So it's kind of nice for him to be able to take the little bit of story that he was able to bring to the 24th century into this and sort of wrap it all together. And I read an interesting article that sort of explains how he was able to wrap up a bit of a loose end, and we'll get to that in a second.
Well, this is the first time we get confirmation that this is in the Prime universe.
Yeah, right, exactly, yeah. Because we kind of figured, like, you kind of figure, number one, I know Boom Studios, and I know the comics aren't canon, but Boom Studios, I'm sure they'd like them to be, but they're not. I mean, now they're not going to be. But Boom Studios did like sort of a prequel to the first reboot movie, but it was set in like the 24th century. So I think Data or B4, I don't know. It was weird. Like Data was like the captain of the Enterprise or something. 2009.
That sounds oddly
Nemesis.
familiar.
So it would have been B4. I don't know. It was probably B4 or something. So it's totally not canon now. But they tried to dive into that a little bit. But yeah, basically the Romulan supernova kicked off the events of the reboot, which created the alternate timeline, which we know is the Star Trek movies now. But the old TNG original timeline is still intact, and this is the furthest we've been in that. And so that exists. And so we sort of get some background. They have the two Romulans have gone over an agreement with the journalists not to touch on what appears to be a very sore subject: Picard's falling out with Starfleet. And we'll find out why in a second. We get first like this is like the really cheesy TV show montage, though, like a new CNN news show where all these pictures
reporting live from the Picard estate. Here we go.
Right, yeah, exactly. And he's like, "Oh, Picard, he spent a huge career on Starfleet," and it's got like pictures of him from episodes, and I'm like, they had cameras and stuff.
Yeah, it's totally cut straight from the episodes, and it's not like him like posing like it would be. It's just like him sitting in the captain's chair looking over at Riker going,
yeah, it's like a still frame. You see like Netflix there at the bottom, like a Netflix watermark or something. So anyways, the interview immediately goes off the rails, though. This lady is just an asshole. She like
cuts him off, and it starts off with a good question, and then as soon as he goes to answer, she's like, but wait a second. And so you're like, as soon as it starts happening, like, okay, this is not going to end well.
Right, exactly. And at one point, she's just straight up racist because she's like, a lot of people thought the Federation could have put. So basically what happens is she's leading Picard through, this is the 10th anniversary of the Romulan supernova. You're basically a hero in that regards because you ended up saving a lot of people. And she says, a lot of people thought that wasn't going to be a proper use of Federation resources to help one of its longest enemies. And he says, well, there are a lot of lives at stake. And she said, Romulan lives. And he was like, no, lives. Lives are lives. And she said, okay, well, what happened was he was going to lead an armada of 10,000 ships to go evacuate the Romulan people when
because he had left the Enterprise. That was pretty defiant that he had left the Enterprise station to go do this. He was also one of the spear fronts to talk them into doing this. So Starfleet's like, well, and Picard's like, no, we need to do this. This is going to, create peace in the galaxy. Let's go do this.
That's right. Exactly.
He was the spear tip for saving Romulus in general.
Yeah, exactly. He says, well, I can be quite convincing. And then she says, well, then what happened was a bunch of renegade synths, so androids, synthetic lives, apparently hacked the Martian defense shield thing and attacked the Utopia Planitia shipyard and destroyed a large portion or all of the armada that was going to go save these Romulans. And 92,000 lives were lost. And at that point, synths were banned. They call them synths or androids, whatever. And then she brings up Starfleet. He mentions nobody knows why they went rogue, why those androids went rogue. She brings up Starfleet, and she says, why did you leave Starfleet? And he sort of under his breath says, because they stopped being Starfleet.
Yeah.
And she says, I'm sorry, what? And he yells, he's like, because they stopped being Starfleet. We had to go save these people, and they said no. And it's not just disrespectful to life, it's darn right criminal. And so he couldn't be a part of that.
Yep. And then he gets up, kind of old man, interview over, and steps away. And she's kind of sitting there holding her mic in her hand, going, "Okay,
Yeah, just a
that's
piece
what you
of
get,
shit.
though." Yeah,
Just a
that's
total
really
piece of
what
shit.
you get. So,
Yeah, exactly. And he brings up because she says, it was a task that was on par with the building the pyramids. And he says the pyramids were a monument to vanity. He said this, if you want to think of a historical allegory, is Dunkirk, which is a really interesting bit because the filmmakers would probably presuppose that it's a reference that's just obscure enough, but one that's so recent in our current pop culture vernacular, because Dunkirk was a relatively popular movie that came out a couple years ago from Christopher Nolan. And so, I went to go see that movie. I understand the reference. She does not, the journalist does not. And you can see the look on his face when he knows she doesn't get
she
that.
doesn't know. She just has that. What?
And then we find out later that he's actually been writing history books. So that little bit was good too. Starfleet basically had said after this attack on Mars, nope, mission's off. We're not going to rescue these people. And that kind of wraps up why it was Spock who basically by himself was trying to go help with the supernova without any help from anybody because Starfleet had said no. And so that's kind of
that ship that Spock had was from the Romulan High Council anyway with the red matter. And I'm sure that red matter is probably pretty heavily guarded and not wanting to be used. So it explains why it was so odd the way it was. So makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it totally does. It'd be very interesting to quiz Kurtzman with how much canon he has written down somewhere or in his head that he simply hasn't had an outlet for the 24th century yet until Picard shows up. And I'm thinking to myself, man, this Picard thing I think is going to be huge. We need a Worf series. We need a Geordi series. I want to explore the 24th century more. This
is what I call long-term booking.
Yeah, it is. From
his perspective.
Definitely long-term booking. So watching, among all the people watching this interview around the galaxy, Dahj is watching in Boston. She has left and she's on the run. She sees Picard, recognizes him, understands I have to go see him. On the vineyard the next morning, Picard, he's opened up a bottle of wine and he's getting buzzed. And I love how they shot this with a wide angle lens. So the glass looks a little bit bigger when it's placed closer to the camera.
It's like fishbowl size.
It is. It totally is. It's like a fisheye lens because this thing looks like a fishbowl. You're right. You're absolutely right.
I'm surprised he didn't go, I can't drink this all here. Number one, have some.
I know, exactly. And number one is obviously concerned about him as well. Dahj eventually shows up. She finds him. He takes her in. There's lots of talk about him knowing her. She's like, hey, do you know who I am? And he's like, he pauses and she says, why do I know that you think right now that you know me, but you don't know me, where?
But you don't know where.
Yeah. And so he's like, I don't know. I sort of get a feeling like I know you, but she says, why do I know that I'm safe with you? So a little bit later on, after she's had time to calm down, chill out, the Romulans they're comforting her. They fix her head wound with them little things that Crusher used to use.
Dermal regenerator.
Yeah, Picard sits down to chat her up, and he notices she has a necklace that's got like two circles intertwined.
Yeah.
And there you kind of like that, yeah. And he's like, "That's a very interesting necklace." She says that her father gave it to her.
Yeah. And so here's something kind of later on, but she takes it off and gives it to him, and he's like, "Oh, this is very nice, very interesting." And then it kind of gets set to the side.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
I had to go back and catch that. I'm like, why didn't she have it later? But yeah,
it comes into play. Yeah. She tells him her name. It's Dahj, and then she's like, "I know who you are, and not just because of your fame, but I recognize you. I feel like I know you." And it goes back a long way. And Picard realizes that he might know her too, but he cannot tell her where from. End of scene. Picard wakes up, but this time it's in a dream. He opens up the window to the vineyard, but he sees Data out there in his old TNG outfit. And this is the scene from the trailer that we've seen where he's painting a girl in the waves without a face. And just like we've seen already in the trailer, he says, "Would you like to finish it?" And he says, "I don't know how." And Data says, "That's not entirely true, sir."
Yep.
Picard wakes up. He fell asleep at his desk.
Yeah.
And he looks behind him and he realizes that the painting that Data was painting is right behind him in his own office.
Yep.
Except that version of the painting does not have a face.
Yeah, she's turned away. You can see a little bit of hair, but she's looking out at like the sea. Her cloak is up, the face is covered, and the sea's she's looking out that way. You can tell it's a brunette, but that's about it. You don't get to see the actual details on the face.
Right, exactly. So he goes to Starfleet. Now, somebody mentioned in the comments of one of my videos that they thought that this might be Memory Alpha, the big database that Starfleet has.
It's in San Francisco for sure.
Yeah, and so I don't know. It's either that or just a giant storage facility. One of the two.
It just said Starfleet Archive. That's all we got.
Okay. So, anyways, he has a storage facility there, and he has a cute little back and forth with. I'm assuming this is sort of like the librarian version of the EMH. It's a holographic assistant for this stuff,
but very, very cookie cutter, black and white, not really any personality. Whenever she does like research, her eyes kind of go digital. I mean,
it's very computery, and she's like trying comedy. She said they're adding comedy to our programming, and so it's a very non-sophisticated type of thing. It seems very nuts and bolts, like you said. So she's guiding him through it in a storage locker. It's great. We see all these wonderful Easter eggs. There's the Captain Picard Day banner from that great episode.
You know what would be even funnier if it was like one of those storage wars and he just flips up a storage door.
I know, dust comes up everywhere.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But no, pristine vaults. It's like a museum almost of like the Picard Day banner with all the kids' names. That episode's so awkwardly funny. I think you mentioned that one of the Enterprises, that shuttle, I think was one of the shuttlecrafts from Nemesis, I believe.
See, I was wondering if it when they take it down and then the thing comes out of the back.
Yeah, they start off-roading with Worf. Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about I was racking my brain about that, but today when I was watching it again, I was like, did he love that thing? Because remember, he was so excited to drive that off-road thing. I was like, was he so into that he has a replica of the shuttlecraft? But I think you're right. I think that's what it is. And of course, he's got a little model Stargazer there. He's got a model Enterprise E. There's probably a model Enterprise D. I didn't notice one.
There's tons. I mean, they said you could pause that and just, if you had like a 12K resolution, you could pinpoint things from all over. I mean,
that wouldn't surprise. There's a batleth in there. You can assume it's either Worf's or it's maybe given to him when he was the Arbiter of Succession.
The knife, when he had that, when he was in the council meeting.
Was that in there too?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So all that stuff is there. Very interesting it's very interesting that they made such and this is why I guarantee season 2 is going to have to do with Klingons and Worf. Because one of the very few shots they included in the montage before his interview was as his role as Arbiter of Succession.
Yes, which was totally cut from that episode, but yeah.
And his relationship with Worf was so much different, but equally as compelling as his relationship with Data. And that would be so much fun to mine in season 2. I think it'd be
how the Klingon Empire views, not only after Starfleet does what they do, but how they still view, because Klingons could be the bad guys again, who knows? But how they view Picard, because he's not Starfleet. So
yeah, absolutely. So he goes and he finds the other version of this painting in his storage stuff, and this one has a face on it, and it's Dahj's exact face. And he brings up the Hollow Lady and says, "Tell me everything about this." And she says, "It was painted by Data, and it's titled Daughter." And it's like, whoa. Which is interesting that he didn't paint Lal.
No, it is. But here's the other interesting thing, too. When was it painted? I did some research. When was it painted in correlation to his death? They gave a hint.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. What?
They said the painting is like 30 years old. So actually, and this takes place 20 years. So Data painted this 10 years before he died.
Wouldn't they have? Hold on a second, though. Didn't she give a star date?
Yes, and that's 10 years before he died.
Oh, okay. Which would
that's the research I did.
So that would have been okay. It would have been the tail end of the series. It would have been 94. I mean, in our time, if everything is linear, it would have been because the series ended in 94. So yeah, there you go. Wow, good job, Sherlock Tim. So anyways, then speaking of daughter, we see Dahj. She's in Paris now in some alley.
Yep.
She FaceTimes her mom, who's acting really shady. She's like, "Oh, really? People are trying to kill you? That's weird." Yeah, the direction on her mom was a bit weird.
I think it's meant to be that way. It's meant to be off-putting and not natural.
Yeah.
Because what happens is she's like, oh my goodness, I'm being chased after and trying to be killed and everything else like that. She goes, oh, it's okay, honey. Just go back to Picard. And she's like, wait, I just talked to you today. I didn't say I went to Picard. She goes, don't worry about it. Everything's fine. Just go find Picard.
Yeah.
And she's like, what's wrong with you, Mom? And
yeah, she's like, just think about it and focus on him. I just think that the mom, the direction, it came off as too, like, came off as too weird. Like, well, I get that she's supposed to know more than she's letting on.
I don't think her mom is actually her mom, because she's like, honey, sit there, focus, think on Picard. And if you've ever seen BioShock, it's a would you kindly moment where you're like, okay, you're supposed to focus on something. And all of a sudden she almost gets into this, her mom triggers something that makes her go into her Mass Effect Omni tool, and she hacks Starfleet and figures out exactly where Picard is. And so she's doing all this hacking, crazy, cool stuff that we could assume never would A, know where he is, and B, like, what average teenager would know how to hack like that? I mean,
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, who knows what the relationship actually was, you know?
Yeah.
So Dahj she does all that stuff, all the hacking stuff, and she goes and finds Picard at Starfleet, and he tells her he is very excited to discover that Data had a kid. He's very excited about this. She is terrified. And yes, he holds her hand and she's trying to explain to him, look, Data was great. He was, what is he? He says he was all meaning. He was all courage. And she's like, but I remember my dad and having memories with him. He was like, yes, those are your memories and they're great, but they're not real. Like, you're not.
Yeah, he said no one can take those memories away from you because they kind of make up of who you are. But so I kind of like the fact of, I think of it as someone, if you were adopted, you find out you're adopted, you didn't know. It's like, who raised you they raised you. They're your parents. Just because you have somebody else that, they did the thing and then that made you, but that's not who raised you. They're not your parents. And Picard's like, don't worry, you are who you are, but you're from a source that is very special to me. That means more than you'll ever realize.
So here's the this is a terrible analogy, but it's kind of apropos. Androids at this point are persona non grata, right? They are, because he even says everything that you associate androids with, don't think about that.
Yeah.
These androids, as of 10 years prior, had killed, in basically a terrorist operation, 92,000 humans. And he's telling her that she is the daughter of basically what they could perceive of as like the Osama bin Laden of androids, the granddaddy of them all, Data. And granted, we understand that Data is as good as he is, but from their perspective, that has to be a massive shock. Hey, remember those terrorists who killed 92,000 people? You're the daughter of the lead one. And Data didn't.
And Data couldn't be replicated, but yet some reason you're here. So,
Yeah. So I don't know. And he was so excited, but she's so terrified. And I'm like, there has to be a better way to break this, or there isn't. I don't know.
And here's the one thing though that I kind of find about pacing. Same thing kind of goes back to the interview. This is one thing where Picard shoots a lot of information and divulges to her. Same thing with the interview. There's a lot of stuff that happens really fast. It would have been nice if it was drawn out a little bit, but the first episode isn't like an hour and a half long. It's only 45 minutes.
Yeah, true.
So they have a lot of stuff. Picard is, and her scenes are very, very quick. So they cram a lot of story into a very small amount of time.
Yeah.
But she's overwhelmed and Picard's excited, like you said, so it fits the story. Yeah, but that's the one tiny complaint, I guess I would say, about this first episode.
This next bit was hilarious to me, solely for people who are on the Going in Raw Patreon who saw this bonus episode. She says that her dad was a xenobotanist. Do you remember the Xenobot episode of Overrun?
It sounds very, very familiar, but it's not ringing a bell.
When we were talking about robots who are made of flesh.
Okay.
I'll have to get the episode to you because Lars and I were like, wait a sec, because we found an article on CNN about robots who are made of flesh, and these and Larson's like, this is the most effed up thing I've ever heard of. These things are gonna start, they're like starting to like learn and create on their own, and they're exhibiting, and it's like there's these little like they take cells and they turn, like these scientists have taken cells and they've turned them into these little constructs that have like learned how to do things. And I was like, oh my God. And so the episode was hilarious. Like us talking about it, I was all in and he was all out as usual, but it was a great conversation. Anyways, her dad is a xenobotanist. It was funny basically to me and 10 other people who watched it. So he wanted to take her to the Daystrom Institute. She was like, oh, cool. I just got accepted there. He was like, oh, great. She's like, no, not great, because everything's screwed up now. And she cuts him off and says, hey, they just found us. They're over there. And he's like, what? And so there's a bunch of shots of them running, but it's all from behind because obviously you're not going to have Patrick Stewart have a heart attack.
She's trying to carry Patrick Stewart, like dragging him up a stairwell.
Oh my God, I know.
He goes into the building and there's a scene of him holding on the railing, painting, going, she's like, there's no time. I'm like, you're going to kill the poor man.
I know. You're going to kill him before the show even starts.
Yeah. But they get onto a rooftop of like a parking garage or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So they get there, parking garage. they have all these teleporters. They got a parking garage there. So then we have then there's like a big fight scene because like 20 or 10 or 15 of these Romulan guys, they attack. She sort of throws Picard down to sort of protect him near a bench or something, and she takes them all on. She beats the majority of them, but in the end, one of them pops like an acid pill in his mouth and spits it at her, and so she starts to disintegrate as his Romulan rifle is on overload, and his face starts to disintegrate, and it explodes as she's melting away. It was like one of the most violent, over violent deaths I've heard.
Brutal. Now, I think some of the knife moments in Discovery and the original Star Trek are a little more brutal, but for visual wise, it's pretty not graphic because you don't see blood or anything, but it's pretty. You see melting flesh, you see flesh disintegrating. It's pretty.
Why do you think they would have gone the extra? Because the acid thing seems unnecessary. Like you want him to get knocked out, so you have the rifle explode. I mean, did you just need something for her to be dealing with, so she doesn't throw to like make sense that she wouldn't throw this rifle away somewhere?
Yeah, I'm sure all of them, like the whole spy thing. They had a cyanide capsule thing in the back of their mouth in case they got close enough to be able to do it. And when she was activated, they probably like, well, when she activates, you're in trouble. So
yeah, that could be
the only thing you can do.
That could be.
She starts melting, the gun overloads and explodes, and all you see is her kind of beginning to disintegrate a little bit and a big ball of flame, and Picard in the trope gets knocked back and knocked unconscious. Now, we talked about this a little bit. I don't think she's actually dead. You and my wife think she is.
She literally couldn't be more dead. She died huge, like she disintegrated and then got blown up.
No, because so I'm gonna go forward and then go back. So Picard wakes up at Chateau Picard, and the Romulans are like, "Hey, they found you at Starfleet." And he goes, "Well, what about Dahj?" And he goes, "Well, Dahj wasn't there. They didn't find any trace of her. If she had melted into kind of a puddle, there would have been some trace. They mentioned no trace of her though."
Okay, so they also said that the feeds showed him just running around on the rooftop. That was that was weird.
Yeah. There's
going on. Are you suggesting that the entire rooftop experience was some sort of what?
No. I'm saying that it happened, but even if she is dead, they want to get her positronic brain, right? So you only need the top, the head, right? And so
but she is completely disintegrated and blown up.
We didn't see her like dust. We didn't see the snap in Endgame. We didn't see that. We just saw part of her face begin to go and then flames.
Yeah, right when it's blowing up, they go to slow motion and she's like, she is clearly falling apart, man.
We'll see. We'll have this discussion in a couple months.
We will have this discussion again. So then we have Picard waking up in his house again on his couch. His Romulan helpers are there. like you said, the police say it was a whole lot of nothing that happened. He was just running around on the rooftop, and then I don't know what they say happened. Like, was there an explosion or what? Did he fall?
I think they mentioned something about an accident or explosion or something. But why would you have just crazy Picard talking to himself, running around in the?
That was weird. So either the cops are hiding something, or I don't know what. Something's going on. They say, let's see here. So he decides at that moment, he has a sort of, coming to Jesus moment where he's like, I've been waiting around to die for years now, wallowing in my own, rejected dignity, or something along those lines. And he's decided he's going to go do something about all this. So he gets motivation now.
Yep.
He goes to the Daystrom Institute. He meets Dr. Agnes Girardi, and he asks her if it's possible to make a sentient android out of flesh and blood. And she just laughs him off and then realizes.
She laughs right in his face.
Yeah.
He's like this. He's like,
yeah. And
no,
she's like,
no, seriously. She's like the most awkward, funny, they have those awkward moments like in Thor and even in Discovery a little bit. It was hilarious. She's like, no, you're serious? And he goes, did I say anything that was funny?
Yeah, why am I not? Yeah, why am I here? So she sobers up a bit and takes him to the now empty synth research lab because they're not allowed to make these things anymore. They can only speculate. They can write papers, but they can't actually experiment or try to build these anymore.
It looks like an empty cafeteria.
This was Bruce Maddox. Yeah, it did. This was Bruce Maddox from Measure of a Man's lab. Once since we're banned, it's explained, he leaves and nobody's heard from him. And she explains, he's like, okay, so can you do that? Can you make a sentient flesh and blood android? And she said, that was our holy grail. That's what we thought was going to be in our grasp. Data was so special that we needed him to do that. Once he died, it became a lot more difficult. She gets out B4, who we saw last in Nemesis. And I like this. You brought this up the other day when we were talking about this. She explains that B4 was quite a bit inferior to Data. He just didn't have, data they transferred all data stuff into B4, but B4 couldn't handle it, and a lot of that stuff got lost. So it didn't work.
Yep.
And so I really like that because, like you explained, or like you were saying, it makes Data's death more impactful. Him being so unique, him being the thing that is required for this life to blossom, and now that's gone. And then, So she said, with Data, it would have been possible to replicate one.
And B4 is just hanging out in a drawer. She like folds out a drawer and his head is neatly placed. And Picard's like, it looks so much like Data.
Yeah.
But obviously, after the download kind of failed, it's not Data.
He was probably just like a blithering idiot. So Picard then gets out the necklace and she's like freaking out. She's like, oh my God. And she's like, it's a symbol of, and I didn't write down what she said, positronic quantum something or other. And he's like, what is that? And she said, okay, so basically, if you could take one little, I don't know, neuron of Data's positronic net, you can bring life from that. Like that could be the seed for a life, and they are created in pairs. So it seems like Maddox has created these twins. Maybe what happened was he took one piece of it out of B4 that was remaining from Data and used that to give birth to these twins.
Yeah, we don't know where he got that'll probably be part of the plot in the story where he got that part of Data. We don't know.
Right.
And I doubt it would have been part of the download. I really do, because like it wasn't complete and it wasn't the same positronic net.
Yeah,
it wasn't the exact same. So knowing that B4 just failed is kind of a big knife wound to like everybody, because everybody's like, oh, I want to replicate this. And Lore would be the next best thing, but Lore was obviously Rogue, which is Data's brother, by the way, in case you don't know, who's a bad guy. So Data was, like I said, it's just like, it seems like the perfect piece to make everything work, and everything hinges on his positronic net specifically to make everything work. And we know Maddox and him, there's a correlation. There's an episode where Data is writing a correspondence to Maddox, and unless he gave him a sample of it, I don't know what else.
You could reasonably make that assumption. I think you can make the assumption that if he didn't get it from B4, Data probably would have like gifted it to him. Or maybe if he had maybe if Data ever had a moment to encounter his own mortality, maybe he put it aside and said, hey, this is something I'm going to give to you so you can continue on your work. Given that you would think Maddox probably was making a good faith effort to abide by Data's wishes as it pertains to this stuff. I really hope we get to see Maddox again. I know you think you think that he might be dead. I think it'd be great to see him again. So yeah, and it looks like Maddox made the twins and modeled her after the painting that was named Daughter that Data had made, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, because Data would have shared that painting with Maddox probably, since it happened 10 years prior to his death. So that would have made sense too.
For sure. And then Dr. Girardi says, they are created in pairs. So Dahj has a twin. And then we meet the twin. We're at very, very deceivingly, we're with a Romulan warbird. And it goes.
Oh, hold on, wait. So there's imagery. So you zoom in on the necklace, right? And then the necklace shows, and they turn into two fiery rings in space, and then a warbird kind of flows through. So it's like lens flare plus, but it follows these new Romulan ships that look amazing.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty interesting shot for sure.
It was a really fantastic transition. It goes into this base. You don't see what it looks like for reasons we'll get to in a second. You don't see the entirety of it. You just see like a close up of it. It goes in. It's obviously a mammoth thing. But then we see Dahj's twin. Her name is Soji Asher.
Yep.
And she meets a Romulan named Narek, who immediately
doesn't look shady at all. Look shady at all.
I know, right? Exactly. Like, as soon as we see him, he's coming through like smoke. And it's like, okay, well, this guy's a bad guy.
Yeah.
He starts like laying on like a pity party saying, oh, I lost my family.
I just lost my brother a year ago. And, you're so used to fixing things. And she's like, I don't mind. And you're just like,
oh, I like your little overbite. You're cute.
Yeah.
So anyways, she has a necklace also, and she mentions that she's a twin. And then you sort of, at that point, I noticed in the background, totally the Borg freaking pods. Yeah. And I was like, are they on a Borg ship? And this shot is so long. They start going back, they start tracking backwards, and you start seeing the insides of it. And it's like, okay, they're totally in a Borg ship, aren't they? And sure enough, they go out and there's like this huge, really wonderfully shot Borg cube that they're in.
So I had mentioned this either. It looks different than a regular Borg cube because it looks partially deconstructed and everything.
Yeah.
And there was kind of like a light to it, like a green light, but it wasn't that like organic green light that you typically see from the Borg back, in all the movies and Next Gen and everything. It was more of a.
It was what you'd see with a Romulan. It was a Romulan green light because Romulan used to have green lights too.
Yep.
Who knows what they're doing there with it? Maybe I'm sure there are probably going to be Borg drones that we see there.
Well, it says Romulan Reclamation Site was the name of it.
Yeah.
So maybe they just need a place to colonize, and that's what they're kind of using it for. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a good place to start. I don't know. And that was a big moment, and then that's it. That's the end of the episode. So and then we got like a teaser for coming up this season. I don't really want to get into that because
no,
we can be here all day, thinking about.
So I got two things to bring up for the end of this. One of them is kind of a big question that I might trip you up a little bit. So her name was talking about two things and making them one, right? That's where she got the name Dahj. Yeah. And you were talking about Data's, data and organic. So I think that's kind of foreshadowing, obviously, the two different parts. There's a lot of things that lead into that. The second thing, though, we're talking about synths, right? What would happen to what did the EMH call himself in Voyager? Just the doc. What would happen to the doctor, especially since he has his little thing now? Because he's.
Well, if the alternate timeline of Voyager's last episode is to be believed, he was just out and about getting married and doing stuff.
But here's the thing, though, is that says synths. Like, he's almost a synth in a certain aspect.
Yeah, he's a weird. Yeah, I mean, I think they would consider him sentient. I mean, there's it's interesting that they definitely draw the line between sentience and a sentient synth and a non-sentient synth.
Yeah, I really, Alyssa brought that up. So my wife is part of my background passion for this show. And she brought up several things, some things you even brought up too, like the song at the beginning and everything. But there are some characters and some things that brings in giant questions to what happens to these characters, especially since, we're talking about Hugh, and you're talking about 709 and organic versus inorganic. And even somebody that it's like a big character, because once he gets back, he's kind of a hero for helping Voyager get back. But he's not organic. Mm-hmm. And with the EMH, he becomes a solid holodeck, but that's still synthetic. It really makes me worry. Did they just say, okay, you can survive, but you have to stay in your holodeck? Like,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's sort of dependent on that thing. I mean, we're all dependent on our organs working as well. So I don't know. I wonder if they're going to dive into that, because that is an area that's kind of separate. Like, they have never really dove into the idea of holodeck programs and characters becoming sentient way too easily. Like, there have been so many episodes, like the most obvious one, of course, is Dr. Moriarty, who like achieves sentience, and they put him in like a thing which is like beyond fucked up. They're like, oh, we put him in a little box of a simulation because he can't leave. I mean, he couldn't leave anywhere, but they didn't tell him that.
Yeah, but then there was those robots that went to go self-fixing, and then they became sentient and moved on. So I guess it almost becomes a difference of, okay, robots taking over the world. So you're talking, a Terminator versus like smart AI, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But so they're afraid of Terminator, but not afraid of Skynet itself.
Yeah. That seems to be the case. I think they're probably just I would love to see the Doc back. I really would. I mean, there's all sorts of characters I would love to see back. But I'm curious. I don't know they're going to dive into it, because the Doc is an artificial intelligence, but he doesn't have a positronic brain. He's just a program that
and he grew past his program, though. He did get upgrades throughout I just recently finished Voyager a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And they did upgrades to him, because remember, they were sending the EMH back and forth. They did upgrades. So he is a very, very unique program to where they could say he's sentient. But man, I
wonder if they're going to dive into that. That might be too much of a side road for them to try to fit into their whole android human sentient, not sentient thing, because that's a weird situation that he's got going on there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Any last words before we cut this episode?
No, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm glad we know the dates for the next 4 episodes. We might take a break and bring back the other ones. I'm glad they greenlit it for second season. Oh, Whoopi Goldberg agreed on The View, whether it happens or not. But she agreed to be in there. We know there's some other cameos coming up if you've seen the trailers. They're going all in on it, and I am so happy. I really don't have, besides the small pacing issues, no complaints. I almost got teary-eyed a couple times. So. Yeah,
I did too. I totally did. I cry really easily though. So no, I'm very excited about it too. I think I really love the first episode. And thanks for doing this with me, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right, that's it for the Four Lights Podcast, Picard edition. Check out our merch shop. Subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends. Hit that like button. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.
Goodbye.